Hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of Wallace Unchained. And yes, I know, surprising haircut. Not something I would normally wear. Just I had a practical reason for it, and the hair will be back to normal by the end of the month. Alright, so I want to correct a problem in the intellectual discourse that's been going on for quite some time. And I haven't seen anyone else try to correct it. And of course, it's related to the title of the video. And it's possibly a complicated problem to address because these two words, subjective and objective, have different meanings in their context used. But the context can also overlap in such a way that people start misusing them. But it's more than that. A lot of people have a bias in what they think the value of these things are. Lots of people think if a thing is subjective, it has no value because it has no truth. And if something is objective in its nature, it's therefore the only truth. And often they're misunderstanding what subjective and objective logically means in practice and end up believing something that's inherently subjective is somehow objective, or vice versa. I know, what? But hold that thought, because I am likely about to send you into a confusing state of affairs too. So don't get excited just yet. Now, let's do what we normally do at this point in the video. We define some terms, possibly with the help of good old Google for a general reference point. Now, what does it mean when we say subjective? It means derived from personal opinions, tastes, or feelings. Or to put it another way, from or existing within the human mind. Remember that last part, it's key. Now, what does it mean when we say objective? It means derived from facts or without bias or personal opinion or feelings. Or to put it another way, from or existing outside of the human mind. Now, does this mean if something is subjective, it no longer has discernible value in truth? Let me ask you another question. If you're hungry, is that information subjective or objective in its nature? I know what some people are doing right now. You're pointing at the screens going, screw you, Wallace. How dare you so effortlessly throw a paradox in my face? But it's alright. The answer is both. When you're hungry, this is both objective and subjective information, and both are true. Contrary to popular opinion, objectivity and subjectivity do not automatically cancel each other out. You could argue the information itself is purely subjective because it's happening only in your mind, and that's dependent on circumstantial criteria such as your appetite and the last time you ate. But it is coming from an objective source because your hunger is invoked by chemicals and hormones. Now, in this way, you can go to a silly place and say everything is subjective because everything, for us at least, is experienced within the mind. But that serves no purpose. Serves no purpose whatsoever, and certainly doesn't help us understand anything tangible about the world. Especially if you then go off to claim this now means anything is what you say it is. But that's what a lot of people do. They fail to realize subjective simply means from or within the mind, and go and act like as if it's in the mind, it either means everything they say is true, even against objectivity, or everything a person thinks is not true, because it's not objective. But both of these approaches are failing to acknowledge anything logically. No, the point of words like subjective and objective in the context of a philosophical debate is just to say whether a thing exists within the mind or outside the mind. And this brings us to what inspired me to create this episode. Stefan Molyneux asked a question on X for atheists. Now, although I'm prone to calling myself secular agnostic, this is just my way of saying I'm an atheist who is not closed off to the idea of the existence of God. And I have no invested interest whatsoever in fighting with Christians over whether or not their God is real. And I've never done this, actually. And I've never liked it when other atheists do. It happens a lot in philosophy forums. A discussion can involve religion, comes up, and odds are good you're going to have a bunch of atheists demanding proof of God, or everything you're saying is invalid. To me, right? You can have a logical discussion on the practices and ethics of a topic from the point of religion and just focus on the practicability of the logic. Religion, for example, does have a philosophical framework for morality. I don't believe in it, but at the end of the day, if you've ever spent time with religious people, they're otherwise nice enough and obviously have a moral theory of mind. So, whether God is real or not real, they have a framework that works in its own way, and so it can be discussed as to how and why. The same goes for atheists. A lot of them are nice enough people who also obviously have a moral theory of mind, which works in its own way and can be discussed. I ultimately don't care which way you go, just as long as we're all functionally getting along. But this is all important to understand because this question led to a significant debate I had with a number of people who did not like the answer I gave here. Take time to pause and read it for yourself. But the short of it, I said morality is literally subjective because it's a concept that only exists in the human mind and has no objective existence outside of it. It's a social contract. This is just me thinking objectively about the subject, which incidentally is what I call the fundamental form of which logic is practiced. Looking at a thing for what it is and calling it what it is in the form it is presented in reality before me. This to me is what logic is. It's not objectivity itself, it's just how you keep yourself in the realm of objectivity. This said, logic can take us into the realm of subjectivity, which is equally as logically valid if you stick to what we have understood subjectivity to mean. And this is very much the realm of which morality is practiced. And I say practiced, but not derived. And this is where I might remind you of what we said before about hunger. It's both, isn't it? Your interpretation of hunger is subjective, but it's derived from an objective event. I say it's very much the same for morality. Those who have watched my previous episodes, you know, I surmise it's derived from our base instincts to survive and, by extension, avoid pain. Those instincts are genetically evolved from millions of years ago. That's an objective source that had a repeated pattern over all that time. So it's not in the human mind, but the convoluted social contract we create because of it is. But if you were to read the responses I got from people, you'd see what we've gone through just now is just not how people understand subjectivity. They think if a thing is subjective, that means a thing can be whatever they want it to be, and this gives them license to dismiss whatever you say is true or valid. when this is just a failure to engage in a subject matter logically. For something like morality to be a valid concept, whether it be subjective or objective, requires there to be a fundamental reason for either its existence or its practice. The fundamental reason is what we can establish, and then build from there. But if you're not doing this, then you're just arguing over whether or not you think a thing is valid based on whether or not you like the argument. That's a waste of time. But this is what I had in the arguments that followed here. Ultimately, having to ask this fella to give me his standard of morality. And he did what I was expecting, because this is an argument I've seen people give before on the subject of God and morality. They treat God as the objective truth. They treat him as the objective truth or the authority of which makes their truth valid. Now, for me, both those approaches won't work and are logically invalid. First of all, in an intellectual argument, something being an authority is not what makes someone's argument or reasoning valid or invalid. As we know, this is a fallacy called argument from authority. And it's simple enough to understand why authority is fallacious. If I say 2 plus 2 equals 4, is that correct because I'm a mathematician? Or is it because logically there is no other total number of digits you can count when you put 2 and 2 together? I'm not a mathematician, by the way. It's just for the hypothetical. If I was. But of course, it's even worse the other way around. If I was a mathematician and I was telling you 2 plus 2 equals 5, do you listen to my authority as a mathematician? Or do you rely on some critical thinking and do the count for yourself? Now, as for God being the objective truth, yes, here I could have gone down the route most atheists would and start demanding proof. I didn't, but I am sorry if in the circumstance one is trying to say God is an objective truth, you do have to point out where or how he objectively exists. Rather than subjectively. Again, I'm sorry to all the Christians out there. I'm just pointing to the rules of the game. You don't have objective proof of your God. I think you know that. He may very well exist, right? And that's fine, but all you have is evidence and hypotheses, which is all fair enough to believe in him, but it's not in the realm of this objectively exists. But that's not where I went, because that's not actually relevant to what was presented here. What's being presented is not God is what's objective, but morality is objective rather than subjective because of God. And as you can see, the problem I outlined here, God, even if he were real, is not morality itself. He's not the physical affectation of morality. He's just the guy writing the rules for it. Which means the morality in question doesn't physically exist anywhere but in the mind of God. It's from his mind. This still means morality is subjective in its nature, even if God objectively exists. You see what I mean? I don't need them to provide proof of God. We can still logically ascertain what is practicable in reality without it. And as I said here, even God would have his own reasoning for how and why of his rules of morality. Sure, it's all a tall order to ordain what they are, but I don't see what's stopping us from trying, especially since he's left us here to figure things out for ourselves. And yes, he has. I know you guys have your books, but don't go and selectively forget that there's a bunch of other religions out there with their own books that contradict yours. And that these books were written by men, and we're just trusting who was telling the truth. Which is fine, but this situation does leave it up in the air, which is why there's an issue for us to debate. And this is why I say I ultimately don't care which way you go. As long as we're functionally getting along with each other, it's fine. For me, the point of investigating and even defining morality is so we can better understand it, figure out the best way to practice it, and then be able to do so more consistently. Consistency is important for the practice of morality because if the point of it is a social contract for us to get along, then it works best in the form that allows us to get along with most, if not all, people. I say most, as of course, given the world we live in and its varying circumstances, just often makes it difficult to get along with everyone. But that's what I can see is the one thing more important than all of us getting along is can we identify what we're lacking and then improve on it? But anyway, that's all I wanted to cover for this episode. Let me know what you think. Have you encountered these issues where people treat subjectivity or objectivity like the be-all and end-all of intellectual thought? Does it feel like it makes the discussion a waste of time that failed to pin down anything logically? Go now. Start pinning things down logically, and I'll see you all in the next episode.